The disturbing case of incest between siblings and cousins, maintained for 5 generations. Arkansas. Chapter 1. The Hidden Valley. Deep in the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas, where dense forests conceal forgotten hollows and narrow dirt roads disappear into wilderness, there exists a community that time forgot. The Harlow family has occupied this isolated valley for over a century, their presence known only to a handful of neighboring families and the occasional government official who ventures into these remote hills. Our story begins in 1925, when William Harlow, a hard-working farmer fleeing debt collectors from Tennessee, arrived in this secluded pocket of Arkansas with his wife Mary and their 3 children. The Great Depression was approaching, and William sought a place where his family could be self-sufficient, far from the economic collapse that would soon devastate the nation. "This land will provide everything we need," William told his family as they cleared the first acre of forest. "We'll never have to depend on anyone but ourselves." What began as a desperate attempt at survival would evolve into something far more disturbing over the following decades. As we examine birth records, medical files, and interviews with former residents of Newton County, a chilling pattern emerges. William's daughter Sarah, just 16 when they arrived in Arkansas, would later marry her first cousin from a neighboring homestead. Her brother James would eventually take a wife from another family in the Hollow, only to discover years later that she was his half-sister, the product of an affair between William and a neighbor's wife. The isolation that initially protected the Harlows from economic hardship would become the perfect environment for a dangerous genetic legacy to take root. County records from the 1940s show an alarming rate of birth defects among Harlow children, conditions consistent with consanguineous relationships. Dr. Thomas Reynolds, who served as the county's only physician from 1942 to 1968, noted in his private journals, "The Harlow children present with concerning developmental issues. When questioned about family relations, they become defensive or change the subject entirely." By 1950, the Harlow family had expanded to include 3 small cabins clustered around the original homestead. The outside world knew little of their existence, and they preferred it that way. Local shopkeepers in the nearest town, some 20 miles away, described them as standoffish and suspicious of outsiders. What happened within those cabin walls would remain hidden for decades, a secret protected by mountains, forests, and the code of silence that governed the family. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel to receive notifications when we release our next chapter, exposing the shocking medical evidence that finally brought this case to light. Your subscription ensures you won't miss any part of this disturbing investigation into America's hidden history. Here's Chapter 2, Generations of Isolation. As the 1950s unfolded, the Harlow family's isolation intensified. The construction of modern highways bypassed their remote valley, leaving them further disconnected from a rapidly changing America. While the rest of the country embraced television, supermarkets, and suburban living, the Harlows remained frozen in time. County tax records from this period reveal that the family owned approximately 180 acres of mountainous land, most of it unsuitable for farming. They survived through subsistence agriculture, hunting, and occasional sales of handmade crafts and moonshine whiskey. Their limited interaction with outsiders meant few opportunities to expand their social or genetic circles. By 1960, the 3rd generation of Harlows, born in this valley, had reached adulthood. Family photographs recovered from county archives show disturbing physical characteristics becoming more pronounced: unusually close-set eyes, malformed jaws, and disproportionate limbs, all potential indicators of genetic disorders resulting from consanguineous relationships. Martha Jenkins, who taught at the one-room schoolhouse nearest to the Harlow property from 1958 to 1964, recalled her concerns. The Harlow children were always different, not just their appearance, but their behavior. They stuck together, wouldn't mix with other children, and they stopped coming to school entirely after 6th grade. School attendance records confirm Jenkins' account. No Harlow child completed education beyond elementary level after 1955. This further concentrated the family's isolation, ensuring that younger generations had virtually no contact with potential partners outside their extended family. Local folklore began to surround the family. Hunters and hikers reported being warned away from Harlow land by armed men. Rumors circulated in nearby towns about strange cries heard from the valley at night, and deformed children kept hidden from public view. Former Sheriff Clyde Wilson, interviewed in 1982, admitted that law enforcement rarely ventured into Harlow territory. "We had an understanding. They stayed on their land and kept to themselves. We didn't bother them. Looking back, maybe we should have investigated more, but those mountains, they hide things." The most disturbing evidence from this period comes from a midwife who occasionally assisted with Harlow births. In a sworn statement given in 1971, she described delivering several severely deformed infants who died shortly after birth. "The mothers were always young, too young," she stated, "and they never seemed surprised when the babies weren't right, like they expected it." By the early 1970s, the fourth generation of Harlows had begun to bear children. Medical records from the regional hospital 40 miles away show that emergency room visits from family members increased during this period, though they typically refused follow-up care or detailed examination. One doctor's notes from 1974 read, "Patient exhibits signs consistent with autosomal recessive disorders. When questioned about family history, became agitated and left against medical advice." As the outside world slowly encroached on the Ozarks, bringing tourists and vacation homes to once remote areas, the Harlows retreated further into their increasingly dangerous isolation. Chapter 3. Medical evidence emerges. The first substantial breakthrough in understanding the Harlow family came in 1985, when 17-year-old Rebecca Harlow fled the compound and sought help at a women's shelter in Harrison, Arkansas. Severely malnourished and displaying signs of physical abuse, Rebecca provided authorities with the first insider account of life within the isolated community. "My father is also my uncle," she told social workers in a recorded interview. "My mother's brother is my father. Everyone knows, but no one talks about it. When I asked questions, I was beaten." Rebecca's medical examination revealed multiple health issues consistent with inbreeding: polydactyly, extra fingers, a heart murmur, and developmental delays. Blood tests confirmed suspicions of genetic abnormalities typically associated with consanguineous relationships sustained over multiple generations. Dr. Eleanor Simmons, the geneticist who examined Rebecca, later wrote in her case notes, "This represents one of the most severe cases of prolonged familial inbreeding I've encountered in my 20-year career. The genetic markers suggest at least 4 generations of close relative pairings." Rebecca's testimony prompted the first official investigation into the Harlow family. When authorities arrived at the compound in June 1985, they discovered 27 people living in deplorable conditions across 5 crude structures. DNA testing would later confirm that all were descended from the original Harlow family, with complex, overlapping biological relationships. Among the most disturbing findings was the identification of multiple sibling pairs living as couples, as well as uncle-niece and first-cousin relationships that had produced children. Medical examinations revealed that 68% of the Harlow children exhibited physical or cognitive abnormalities consistent with inbreeding depression. If you've made it this far into our investigation, leave a comment saying, "This family's legacy is heartbreaking," so we can understand how many of our viewers are truly engaging with these difficult historical truths. Court records from the subsequent investigation paint a harrowing picture of life within the compound. Children as young as 13 were paired with older relatives in ceremonies that mimic traditional weddings. Education consisted solely of practical skills needed for survival and religious teachings that justified their isolated lifestyle and unusual family structures. Mary Harlow, age 62 at the time of the raid, and a granddaughter of the original William Harlow, functioned as the family matriarch. In her testimony, she defended their practices. "The outside world is corrupt. We keep our bloodline pure. God intended families to stay together." This distorted religious justification had become central to the family's identity, with handwritten religious texts recovered from the compound, revealing a complex belief system that reinterpreted biblical passages to support consanguineous relationships. Dr. James Patterson, the psychologist who interviewed multiple family members, observed, "They've developed a completely isolated moral framework that normalizes what the outside world considers taboo. Children born into this environment have no concept that their family structure is unusual or harmful. The investigation revealed that the Harlows had maintained their isolation through strategic interactions with the outside world. Only a few designated family members were permitted to venture into town for supplies. Children were kept hidden from visitors, and the family deliberately spread rumors about their dangerousness to discourage intrusions. Chapter 4. Legal Interventions and Public Reaction. The 1985 raid on the Harlow compound triggered one of the most complex child welfare cases in Arkansas history. 16 minor children were removed from the property and placed in emergency foster care, while 11 adults faced various charges related to child abuse, incest, and contributing to the delinquency of minors. Court proceedings revealed the profound challenges of addressing a case where perpetrators had themselves been victims of the same system of abuse. Many of the adult Harlows displayed significant cognitive impairments and had never been exposed to conventional social norms. Judge William Brewster, who presided over the initial hearings, noted in his ruling, "This court faces an unprecedented situation where multiple generations have been systematically isolated and indoctrinated into accepting consanguineous relationships as normal. The line between victim and perpetrator is disturbingly blurred." The public reaction to the case was immediate and intense. National media descended on the small Arkansas county, with headlines describing "America's Most Inbred Family" and "Ozark Horror, the Family That Married Itself." Privacy advocates criticized the sensationalized coverage, while medical professionals used the case to highlight the dangers of genetic isolation. The children removed from the compound faced enormous challenges in adaptation. Foster families reported that many of the younger Harlows had never used indoor plumbing, watched television, or interacted with people outside their family. Several displayed attachment disorders and had difficulty understanding conventional family boundaries. Social worker Diane Reynolds, who worked with 5 of the Harlow children, documented their difficult transition. "They're learning concepts most children understand instinctively. The idea that not all family members are potential romantic partners is completely foreign to them. They have to unlearn an entire worldview." Medical examinations of the removed children confirmed the devastating genetic impact of the family's practices. 8 children required immediate medical interventions for previously untreated conditions, including cleft palates, heart defects, and severe scoliosis. 2 were diagnosed with rare recessive genetic disorders that typically occur in less than 1 in 50,000 births in the general population. The adult Harlows mounted a surprising legal defense, claiming religious freedom and parental rights. Their court-appointed attorney argued that the state had no right to impose mainstream values on a community that had functioned independently for generations. This defense gained unexpected support from some libertarian groups and religious fundamentalists concerned about government overreach. Prosecutor Michael Hendricks countered, "Freedom of religion does not extend to practices that cause demonstrable harm to children. The medical evidence of genetic damage alone constitutes child endangerment, regardless of cultural or religious justifications." The trials exposed deep divisions in public opinion about how justice should be served in a case where conventional notions of criminal responsibility were complicated by generations of isolation and indoctrination. Chapter 5. Legacy and Aftermath. Nearly 4 decades have passed since the Harlow case first shocked Arkansas and the nation. The legal, medical, and social ramifications continue to reverberate through multiple systems and lives. Of the 11 adults charged in 1985, 7 were eventually convicted of various offenses. Sentences ranged from probation to 15 years imprisonment, with the court taking into account the unique circumstances of their upbringing. Mary Harlow, the family matriarch, died in prison in 1992, never acknowledging that their family practices were harmful. The 16 children removed from the compound experienced widely varying outcomes. A longitudinal study published in the Journal of Child Psychology in 2005 tracked their development and found that those placed in specialized therapeutic foster homes before age 10 showed the greatest capacity for adaptation to mainstream society. Older children struggled more significantly with social integration and forming healthy relationships. Dr. Richard Montgomery, who led the study, concluded, "The Harlow children demonstrate both the remarkable resilience of the human spirit and the profound damage that can result from severe social isolation and genetic harm. Their experiences offer vital insights into the critical periods of social development. Several of the removed children, now adults, have chosen to share their stories publicly. Jessica Harlow, who was 8 when removed from the compound, graduated from the University of Arkansas with a degree in social work and now advocates for children in isolated religious communities. "I remember believing it was normal to marry your cousin or brother," she told a documentary filmmaker in 2018. "Deprogramming that belief took years of therapy. I still struggle with trust and intimacy, but I've built a life I'm proud of." Others have not fared as well. 4 of the removed children later died by suicide, and several others have battled substance abuse, criminal behavior, and inability to form stable relationships. The genetic legacy of the family continues as well, with several survivors dealing with chronic health conditions stemming from recessive genetic disorders. The original Harlow property was eventually sold at auction to pay for medical care and legal fees. The remote valley has since been incorporated into the Ozark National Forest, with no physical trace remaining of the compound that housed 5 generations of isolation and abuse. The case prompted significant changes in how Arkansas and other states approach isolated communities. Child welfare agencies developed specialized protocols for intervening in cases of suspected generational abuse, and medical schools now include the Harlow case as a cautionary study in genetic counseling courses. Today, genetic testing can identify carriers of recessive disorders before they have children, potentially preventing the kind of severe outcomes seen in the Harlow family. But the case remains a sobering reminder of how quickly human beings can develop harmful practices when isolated from broader society and medical knowledge. The story of the Harlows ultimately transcends simple narratives of villains and victims. It reveals the complex interplay of geography, poverty, religious distortion, and human psychology that can, under the right conditions, transform a family's desperate search for independence into a multi-generational tragedy. If you've watched this far, it's because you care about understanding the difficult parts of our human history. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end," so I can get to know you and understand who truly appreciates the stories on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe to receive notifications about our next investigation. Like this video if you found it informative, and share it with others who appreciate thoughtful examinations of difficult historical cases.